Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Case for Quality Open Forum call. My name is Tatiana, and I will be your operator for today. At this time, all participants are in listen-only mode. Throughout the call, we will conduct a question-and-answer session. If at any time you require operator assistance, please key *0, and an operator will be happy to assist you. This call is being recorded. I would now like to turn the conference over to your host for today, Mr. Dwight Abuhaka, Program Manager for Case for Quality. Please proceed, sir.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to an open forum, which means it's a public forum for a Case for Quality. We're on the WebEx, and also Jackie Torfin has a group of folks at the Graduate Center of St. Cloud State University, and we'll be joining her in a moment. Just want to welcome you. We have a very packed agenda. We have some speakers that unfortunately have to leave after their talk, so we're going to get right into the introductions. Here's the agenda. Dr. Michael Rulin will be speaking first. And before we go forward, because this is an open forum, I'd want Jackie Torfin to go through sort of what the Case for Quality is for those of you who haven't been with us on this journey. And Jackie, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Dwight. So the Case for Quality was launched by FDA in order to address repetitive quality issues that were being found among device manufacturers, and they were finding stagnant data regarding the quality issues. It started in 2011 with the McKinsey report called Understanding Barriers to Quality. It was a white paper that was published. After that, the FDA developed a Case for Quality forums, and they worked on that for a while, and in 2014, there was a contract awarded by FDA to MDIC, who is supporting this particular conference today, the Medical Device Innovation Consortium, to lead the CFQ project. MDIC is the first public-private partnership created with the sole objective to advance med device regulatory science. They've got many, many projects. They've got a website that details all of the initiatives that they're working on. CFQ is one of them. Since 2014, MDIC has driven lots of different models, methods, and metrics in order to enable a new culture of quality across the entire medical device ecosystem. So the Case for Quality is really bringing the FDA and med tech companies, healthcare providers, payers, and patients to collaborate to inspire adoption of quality practices that, when they're present in device design and production, they enhance patient safety and access to high-quality medical devices. So it's really a first-of-its-kind initiative that brings all of these different stakeholder groups together in order to really shift the focus from regulatory compliance to a state of sustained product quality. We're trying to create continuous engagement with this very broad set of stakeholders in order to advance that device product quality. So this is a great pictorial. It's showing how we're trying to engage different stakeholders. We're starting in the middle with FDA and med device industry, and we're pushing this out across the other stakeholders. We're starting in the middle, and we're going to healthcare providers, healthcare payers, and eventually ending up with consumers and patients, really starting to focus first on getting FDA and med device industry engaged, and then really bringing it forward through the rest. So we're now starting to focus on healthcare providers, which is one of the reasons we're so excited to have Dr. Rulin with us today. We do have 4 working groups. You're going to hear from each of them today. Device quality metrics, the maturity model, the competency group, and advanced analytics. I'm not going to go ahead and give you an idea of what each of these are. The groups themselves have great introductions, and you'll learn more about each one of these 4 pieces of this movement.
Great. Thank you, Jackie. And I neglected to say that you're Vice President of Quality and Regulatory Compliance at Logic PD there in Minneapolis. So thank you so much for going through that with us. Our next speaker as Jackie said, is from the healthcare provider stakeholder group. Dr. Michael Rulin is the Vice President and Division of Medical Education of the Carolinas Healthcare System. And some of you who have attended other forums may have seen him at the last forum. We're very pleased to have Dr. Rulin back to get his perspective on Case for Quality. Dr. Rulin?
Thank you, Dwight. I very much appreciate the opportunity to come before this group again. This is hugely important work. I'm delighted to be part of it, and thank you for the invitation. Hopefully I'll be able to leave some time at the end of my comments for questions. Leave some time at the end of my comments for commentary and questions. So I would like to address quality leadership within healthcare itself. From time immemorial, physicians managed to find themselves placed on top of pedestals, and until the relatively recent past, and I'm really talking about over the last 100 years in the United States, doctors were judged as to the quality of care they could provide by the training that they had received. So if a physician had gone through medical school at Harvard, Cornell, any of the premier universities, by definition, he provided quality care, and his thought about quality was unquestionable. At about the turn of the last century, in fact, just about 100 years ago, two things happened. A study called the Flexner Report was undertaken to study the process of education in the field of medicine at large, and that report was generated to address the then existent fields of allopathic medicine, osteopathic medicine, homeopathy, naturopathy, and a number of other disciplines that were trying to gain prominence within the United States. It was also recognized that there was vast variation in quality, and in fact there were quite a number of charlatans out in the greater world because of the lack of standardization and the fact that no leadership was being brought forward. So the Flexner Report created an opportunity for standardization of medical education within the United States. And over this following 100 years, we still have had a bit of the premise. Most people don't argue that a MD from the Harvard School of Medicine isn't of some value. The real question is whether or not standardization techniques exercised throughout the United States have brought the quality of physician training itself up to standards that approximate the work done at Harvard. The second thing that happened near the turn of the last century was that the American College of Surgeons constituted an effort talking about how to standardize quality within healthcare institutions themselves. And they constituted, as part of the American College of Surgeons, what ultimately became the Joint Commission on Accreditation of Hospitals. As we've moved forward, there still has been much emphasis on physician skills in terms of being able to monitor quality. And as we've moved particularly into the last 25 years, there's been an increasing recognition that, number one, doctors did not especially do a great job of policing themselves. And number two, while being presented with increasing capabilities to examine data, they sort of ignored that and fell back on the old practices of saying that a doctor says this is how it should be and we're happy with that. Particularly since the United States has been engaged in discussions about healthcare reform, we find ourselves in a much more data-rich environment where data sources external to the work of any given physician or any given hospital are used to derive conclusions about the work taking place in physician practices and hospitals. And so the work in quality leadership has started to focus away from that credentials-based work. I share this with you because, next slide please. What is now happening in healthcare is that the provision of healthcare, the management of healthcare, the things that we derive about the work done in healthcare is now a team sport. Healthcare itself is rapidly trying to assume the culture where any member of a healthcare team should be empowered to raise a hand and to, in essence, stop the line the same way it happens in an auto manufacturing plant in Japan. That's a difficult premise. We still have healthcare providers and physicians who allow emotions to intrude on that sort of environment, but that is the work that healthcare itself is engaging in. Next slide, please. So among the philosophies that healthcare providers are endorsing are things like this book. Dr. McChrystal wrote about his work in Afghanistan and the fact that the environment there was so rapidly changing and so rapidly moving that one could not control the troops deployed in Afghanistan through a highly centralized approach. General McChrystal flattened the organization in Afghanistan, brought unit leaders from throughout the country together to meet all together and participate both in planning and joint decision making, so that should any operational unit lose contact with his staff, they would still know how to respond in terms of any kind of a battle scenario. This body of work has been highly touted in healthcare as a mechanism to start to approach the issues that all circulate around healthcare reform. I mentioned this previously in a prior presentation, but the four basic tenets of healthcare reform are to make patients better, to not hurt them, to be nice to them, and to not bankrupt them. And in order to integrate that entire body of work, there really has to be an extraordinarily high level of communication amongst all the various business units that go into providing care to a patient. So that's a book that's been out in the management literature a lot. On the next slide, there is the opposing approach. This was Abraham Lincoln's approach to running government, and interestingly enough, if you're familiar with this text, President Lincoln actually appointed the rivals for the candidacy of the presidency of the United States into his cabinet. So after he was elected, he appointed three gentlemen who had been competitors for the presidency to his cabinet, and he is felt to have been exercising political genius in having done that because of the conversations and the work that started to occur among people who had been his rivals. As it turned out, I believe Secretary Seward was actively plotting to become the candidate for the presidency in 1864 during the time that he served as, I think he was Secretary of State, if I recall that appropriately. That sounds a lot like the present political environment, but nevertheless, that was in the 1860s. And some of the attributes attributed to this were that that the team was far more effective than it might otherwise have been. Next slide. So what I want to do is to talk about a case with you, and I guess as I move through this material, I would like folks to consider whether or not your organization and whether your part in MDIC is really a team of teams approach or a team of rivals approach, and there can be positive attributes to both. But let's consider this set of pieces of equipment, and if you find on this list that your organization helps to manufacture or distribute some of these components utilized in healthcare, then I want you to pay particular attention to the case material that I'm going to be talking about over the next couple minutes. I think we can move to the next slide. Among the organizations who we have identified that may have had equipment or products involved in this case are listed here. Here's some logos for you to peruse, and the next slide shows another additional set. We believe that organizations all up here could very well have been engaged in this case. So let's start talking about it a bit. Next slide. So when one acts as the chief medical officer in a hospital and you start your day by opening up a letter that's come from a patient, your heart skips a couple beats when something starts like this, but we'll go ahead and explore it. Dear CVICU team, you may not remember us, but my dad was a guest of yours in September through October of 2014. He had emergency quadruple bypass surgery and was sedated in CVICU for almost a month. We know now that he didn't have a good set of odds of making it through all that. But because of you and the amazing care you gave to him and to us, he beat the odds and is still with us today. He was able to walk me down the aisle on April the 10th, 2016, and I'll never be able to thank you enough for that. You gave him back to us, and you will always have a special place in our hearts. We are forever grateful. So what I'm attempting to do today is to share the positive outcome that the hospital was recognized for providing with all of you whose products contributed to this successful outcome. My belief is that when one spends 5 weeks in a cardiovascular intensive care unit and is able to walk out the door, there were problems with the hospital stay. But my belief is that the high level of functioning amongst all the hospital team members, the physicians, and all of the products that came into play in caring for this individual is a significant accomplishment. And what I'm hoping to address is the thought that in this greater world, one does not work in isolation anymore. We are all part of an effort to bring a greater and higher level of care to all of our patients. And all the folks on this phone call are part of this case. And so I wanted to express my gratitude to you for helping to achieve this result for this young lady. Next slide. Dwight has been gracious enough to share this graphic with me and to briefly talk about it a bit. I would like to focus on the two frames in the left side of this set, and if you could advance the slide, we'll look at the left upper one. As one starts to address issues about quality with medical devices, these questions have arisen. I don't know exactly what product quality even means. Okay, well, thanks for telling me what it means. How do I recognize it, measure it, know if I have it? Daunting. How do I figure out the practical know-how to implement this well in my company? How can we help the business people appreciate the value of quality so they will support our efforts? And is FDA going to support this approach? I'd like to share just a couple thoughts when I see these questions as a healthcare provider, because those of us on the provider side have been in this journey for quite a period of time now. When a physician and patient enter into a discussion in particular about implanting a device into a patient, both of them assume that they will be working with the highest quality materials available. When the patient views the physician, patients have now gotten past the part where they look at a physician, try to figure out where he went to med school, try to wonder whether or not he's competent. Patients now approach physicians with the underlying assumption of competency, that the work that the physician is proposing will be flawless as far as the physician is concerned. And I would have to say that that thought about flawlessness does extend itself into how a patient views products that are proposed for use in their individual conditions. So for the patient, and I would say in their behalf for physicians as well, product quality means the highest level of infallibility that can be reached. The assumption would be 100% performance, 0% failure rate. And while that is a very difficult bar to try to jump over, those are the expectations in healthcare at this point in time. So in the prior meeting, we also talked about that part about don't bankrupt me and about how patients are focusing on quality. There is an equation that you can look at, and if you don't change quality, then the only thing that you can do to create value for patients and in physician minds is actually to lower the price of the products that one produces. That's usually not something that most people enjoy doing, and so it's imperative to focus on the piece of the quality equation that really does drive the quality agenda forward. One of the questions that probably does not appear on this list is that thought about what patients think about products, about how they deal with product failure, about how they would deal with having to have a separate surgical procedure to remove a device or a material that was no longer working or had developed complicating conditions. And so I applaud the organization for all of its efforts to bring the patient voice into the discussion about what quality means, because for us in healthcare delivery, that's what we deal with all the time now. I think we've probably done enough with that slide. Let's move forward to the next one. When one interacts with healthcare systems, I'm sure that folks on this phone call have thought about the identification of device failures and adverse events after they've reached patients. And I've looked a bit at some of the frameworks for collecting data. There is undoubtedly a national data bank that would afford access to the thought that a device has failed. My question is whether or not we approach hospitals and health systems and have the ability to obtain that directly from healthcare providers, because everyone in the equation has had to deal with litigation in the past, and there's a lot of protective behavior that circulates around data sets of that nature. As the case for quality moves forward, that loop has to be closed in some fashion. There needs to be a protected space for that interchange of information to take place so that both manufacturers and healthcare providers can enter into productive discussions about what device failures have meant. It would be extraordinarily valuable, I would think, for manufacturers to be made party to things like root cause analyses when device failures have happened. That presently is a very protected data set that sits within healthcare organizations, and I believe that we will have to move forward with some way to breach that discussion. Implementation, as it has been for healthcare providers itself, will be a barrier. This goes back to culture. Will the organization be a team of teams? Will the organization be a team of rivals? What will the philosophy be in terms of bringing the manufacturing community together to jointly approach questions about quality in devices? The product quality definition is also interesting to me. Again, from the patient and from the physician perspective, it really is expected to be 100% because the production of these devices is a human endeavor. Perhaps we'll never reach that gold standard 100%, but it would be a laudable goal to target 0% failure rates, 0% recalls, if that would ever be possible. And then the final part that I just wanted to touch on was, how does one evolve culture from simply meeting compliance guidelines to being engaged in the discussion about advancing quality as a cultural attribute, as something that people want to do, not because they have to, but because they want to be part of a bigger, better process to bring improved health care to the citizens of our country. The healthcare provider's reaction to this, you can imagine being a physician that trained in the mid-40s, and as the discussions about quality first started to arise, one did not want to be challenged. Doctors did not like having their authority questioned, and what they said about quality was supposed to move forward, kind of from my lips to your hands was the approach toward quality provision. If you really think about that, you know, doctors probably deserve to be knocked off their pedestal for that sort of behavior, because the present situation is one where I recently had the opportunity to congratulate a first semester, first year nursing student who walked into a room with a senior cardiac surgeon and said, sir, this is actually a protected area and you need to be gowned and gloved for infectious disease purposes. In the past, that older doc would probably have scolded the nurse for being so impertinent as to even question his presence in the room. This time around, in this day and age, the doctor thanked her for bringing her concern to his attention and for helping him to protect their joint patient. So the evolution of culture in healthcare itself has advanced. We've moved away from the authoritarian approach, and we've moved more toward working toward teams. If I could have the next slide, please. This has been the reaction from most clinicians in terms of being told what to do. It's not a good premise for any human being to accept direction from another entity when they don't understand how and why the rules, regulations, or standards were developed. Doctors still balk at being told to prescribe certain kinds of antibiotics that others are not necessary and perhaps harmful. There were recent discussions, I think, the morcellator debate was very pertinent in the country. For those of you not engaged with morcellators, when laparoscopic surgery is undertaken to do a hysterectomy, it's often offered to the very obese clients as the only safe way to do that procedure, and to others as a more comfortable way to pursue the surgery. It's often done because of uterine fibroids, and so the doctor is confronted with taking a very large organ out through a very small laparoscopic opening that he's made in the patient's abdomen. A morcellator is kind of like a blender at the end of a laparoscope. The doctor manipulates the patient's uterus into a bag. The morcellator is reduced into the bag to kind of grind up the uterus, and then it can be pulled out through a much smaller opening. The problem with that process was that uterine fibroids can contain cancer cells under some circumstances, and the process of breaking up the fibroids with the morcellator was discovered to have allowed some cancer cells to be introduced into the abdomen of patients, and there were a few individuals who had subsequently developed cancerous lesions following surgery for fibroids. The doctors argued that for the extremely overweight individual, the only safe way to proceed with surgery was to do it laparoscopically, and the only way to get the uterus out was through the use of morcellation. And they provided lots of data sets that said it's actually safer for the patient to face the risk of a potential cancer than to face the sure risk of complications from surgery. And so the initial response to device recalls and to health systems that said, we're just pulling this product off our shelves and we're not going to approve its use in this situation, was similar to the image you see in front of you. Doctors felt that their ability to make clinical decisions was being taken away from them and balked at it. In the next slide is the image of a physician who is more likely to have helped engage in the decision about what would happen to voluntarily decide to not use the morcellator because understanding the risks involved, he understood that it could potentially end up being a risk for him as well. But the real culture change in healthcare has been to not issue dicta downwards toward the population of physicians, but to really try to engage them in conversations about quality. And so finally, on the last slide, the question returns, should the philosophy in terms of engaging a new culture of quality in this effort represent one of a team of teams, one of a team of rivals? Is there some other construct that could help the organization move forward? The ultimate wish that I would hold for the organization and that I've tried to provide for you today is I shared with you a case where we were all successful. Everyone on this phone call was successful in helping that young bride be walked down the aisle by her father. And my wish for the organization would be that for generations of young brides to follow, that we as an organization could move forward and focus on that as our ultimate goal. And with that, I'm happy to respond to any comments or questions.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Ruin. Operator, could you please inform the attendees how to ask questions? And then once you do that, Jackie, we'll move to you to see if you have any questions there in Minneapolis.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to ask an audio question, please key *1 on your phone, then record your name, followed by the # key. Questions will be taken in the order received. Please key *1, then record your name, followed by the # key to begin.
Great, thank you. Jackie, any questions there at your site?
Hey, Dwight, it's Mark Swanson here, too. My question for Dr. Ruin has to do, again, with the follow-up maybe to the liability question. Often, from a manufacturer standpoint, we won't get the device back, and we're still required to complete an investigation, particularly for MDRs and those types of things. And I'm wondering, what can be done, or what's the message we should be sending from the manufacturer standpoint to help, payers, providers, particularly providers, understand that we need to get those devices back to complete that investigation, and we're really on their side.
I think from my perspective, you're right. We really are all on one team. It is the approach about the bride at the wedding. That's our goal. That is there for all of us. The healthcare provider that gets so bound up in worries about litigation related to the device is doing probably all of us a disservice by not transmitting the information, getting the device returned to manufacturers. In my mind, I envision, I guess, what I would propose as a patient safety organization focused entity that would allow us to come together in a legally protected environment. And let me describe what happens within healthcare. Within my health system in the past, it was not possible for one hospital in our system to communicate information about an adverse event to any other hospital in our system. The individual quality committees in a hospital can bring any case under consideration that they want to, and there is strict confidentiality governing the considerations of that case. When one hospital reaches out to communicate a concern to another hospital, if there are any case specifics involved in that, the questions, the communications themselves can become discoverable if they take place outside of that committee work. And so our system was we actually at one point were ranked as the #1 organization contributing to the hospital engagement network a couple of years ago. And one of the ways that we accomplished that was we created a federally qualified patient safety organization. That entity allowed the hospitals within the confines of that organization to communicate one to another about adverse events, because now, as opposed to representing, even though they were part of the single healthcare system, they were now part of a patient safety organization that itself had the confidentiality protections to allow those discussions. If an entity could be constructed so that at some level within the United States, manufacturers could fall within the envelope of a patient safety organization along with healthcare providers, my simplistic thought is that a mechanism like that might allow that discourse to take place, and that we might all be allowed to be more open with one another, because ultimately the goal of those discussions really isn't to protect one another. It's really to figure out what happened with a given device and how to alter its production or its quality so that that event doesn't happen again. In hospitals, the whole purpose of conducting a sentinel event analysis is to identify all the things that led to that event and to create an action plan to remedy each of those things. I think we would be far stronger if we could come together under that sort of an umbrella and jointly move that work forward.
Great. Mark, any other questions from your location?
I don't think so. And just as a follow-up to that, one of the things I guess I realized too is that it's not actually the providers that may be holding it. Often it is the hospital's, what do you call it, risk management office or whatever, will grab a hold of the device and not allow it to come back with us, you know, expecting some pending litigation and those types of things. So it's, you know, even wider than I stated. I'm glad, Dr. Rulin, you kind of brought that in, that we all have to realize what that ecosystem looks like.
Just a minute, Mark. Just to add to that, I don't think it's possible for the clinicians to meet their goal of identifying the root causes of all the pieces if they don't have all of the players in the team, which would include the device manufacturer, because the device manufacturer has the design manufacturing knowledge of how the device is assembled and made that may have contributed to the problem in the first place.
I agree with that premise completely, yes.
Great. So, operator, are there any audio calls?
No, sir. No one has queued up for questions at this time.
Okay. Well, Dr. Rulin, I know you have to run, and again, we're so appreciative of you coming back and giving us your perspectives. It's always good to hear your stories and how they end up, you know, showing the teamwork that's really truly involved in healthcare and in case for quality. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. I apologize I can't stay with you today. I was able to join the conference due to Dwight's magnificent scheduling. I'm very appreciative of that, and I wish I could sit with you for the rest of the morning, but I've got to run.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Rulin.
Thank you, everyone.
So we'll move on, and Jackie and I have a question for the audience that we want you to think about as you listen to the 4 working groups in the case for quality, and that is, if the working groups could accomplish one thing for me or my stakeholder group, it would be something, X, Y, Z, whatever it would be. So if that's the question we'd like you to think about as you listen to the 4 working groups. We are going to have a few minutes at the end of each working group to have a question or two, and at the very end, at around 11 o'clock or so Eastern time, we'll have a call to action to have a dialogue with the working groups, and that's when we'd like to have you answer this question. So please be thinking about it, both there live in Minneapolis at the Graduate Center and on the phone. So we'll go now to the 4 working groups that Jackie alluded to in the opening presentation, and we have 4 of the leaders of those working groups with us. We have Jody Bashan, who's a Quality Systems Director, Corporate Quality for Stryker, and she's going to lead us off with the MDIC Quality System Maturity Model update. Jody?
Great. Thanks very much, Dwight, for the introduction. I'm actually the co-lead of this team, so I will be taking the lead for George Serafin from Deloitte, who's also leading this work group with me. We can move on to the next slide, please. So the efforts of this work group on maturity modeling started in earnest in spring of 2015, and so we just celebrated our anniversary of a year just this month. And our focus area has been to explore how connected a medical device manufacturer's level of quality system maturity is to their ability to consistently and proactively deliver on product quality. So really trying to paint the picture of the connection between those two things. When a manufacturer stretches beyond simply complying to regulations and standards, do they demonstrate a greater understanding of and control and efficiency in addressing product quality problems even before their customers feel or see them? And is that something that we can depict and can demonstrate and show in a scalable way across diverse sizes and types of organizations and medical device manufacturers? So you can see the background and the objective on this slide are really geared towards that and depicting this for all medical device manufacturers. So a tall order for sure for this work group. Move on, Doug. Thank you. So before we get too far ahead of ourselves and really talking about the specifics of this, we want to be sure we've developed a tool set that we think will work as we define out what quality system maturity looks like, and again, in that flexible and scalable way. We based our maturity model framework and tools on a model called CMMI. Some of you might be familiar with that. If not, I would strongly encourage looking that acronym up. It is a model that can be used across various industries, not just medical device, to gauge the maturity in meeting customer requirements and regulatory requirements as well, no matter what industry you might be in. We decided to take that model and really form it into the requirements of QSR and ISO, so take that CMMI framework and add into it the requirements that we all need to meet as medical device manufacturers, really as a baseline. So meeting those requirements are the baseline of maturity leveling, and then moving up from there into how a company really is more proactive and develops some leading thoughts into product quality. We started in the area of manufacturing quality, which you can see as the second bullet on this slide. It's a limited subset of the regulations and standards, absolutely, but we do feel that that's the right area to start and really explore how this model can work and can we accomplish what we set out to do by measuring maturity levels and then trying to correlate that to product quality. We also feel that, starting in that area, we can measure that across a variety of different medical device companies. As you saw in the presentation from Dr. Rulin, no matter what you make, you have some element of manufacturing, and we can look at it that way as well. As we move forward with our proof of concept and looking at this area, we're providing guidance and training to companies who are part of this proof of concept assessment, looking at manufacturing quality. And we're also aiming to do an assessment in this one area at an off-site neutral location, including FDA, but certainly going through more of a maturity assessment than a compliance audit. This is not a full CMMI assessment, nor is it an audit from FDA. It's really an assessment done in partnership between industry and FDA and CMMI to really gauge the maturity levels of medical device companies. As we look at our goals of moving forward into maturity model assessments, primarily we hope that by assessing the levels of maturity, we can deliver on the center of this visual, patient safety and product quality, and really be able to gauge how that's improved and more proactive as a company matures. However, there's many, many other benefits as well, as you can see by going around in the circle around this visual here. Opening up a more collaborative conversation with FDA in that non-inspection setting, really starting to use the tools that we've developed here to have business conversations about what the value of quality system requirements, and then moving beyond that demonstrates and how we use that in business conversations. as quality professionals. And as we demonstrate our ultimate goal, what impact moving up on the maturity level scale has on product quality, we really hope that we'll be able to demonstrate that and open up those conversations locally as well as between industry and FDA ultimately. As we look at our proof of concept, again, really trying out these tools, making sure it works, making sure what we set out to do, we believe that we're going to be able to achieve those goals that I just mentioned. Here is our timeline that you can see on this slide. We do have a list of proof of concept participants today. If you are interested in becoming one, you can certainly let us know. We'll be looking to kind of lock those down in the next 2 weeks, though, so please be sure that you feel strongly that you'd like to participate in this. We are developing and finalizing those proof of concept tools. We'll begin the execution phase between the June and July timeframe. Again, would be asking for a meeting offsite at a neutral location, and the proof of concept participants who have already signed up would be doing that. And we would be just analyzing this tool that I've just talked about, making sure it works, making sure that we're achieving what we set out to do, and then rolling out a broader pilot towards the end of this year, or Q1 of 2017, and moving forward with a broader set of participants and moving beyond that manufacturing quality subset of the regulations and standards and really moving out that maturity model to cover all areas, including design, service, et cetera. We also work to create a much, much more detailed list of benefits than what you saw on the previous slide, and we did that between FDA, industry, and CMMI to really pinpoint what we hope to achieve in that proof of concept phase that you see on this timeline, as well as what we hope to achieve when we open it up a little bit more and do more of a pilot phase later on this year and into next year.
And Jody, that probably should be 2016 in those last couple of bullet points.
This slide, Dwight, I think the planning phase and the development of the maturity model will be this year, but rolling out to the pilot will be, yes, actually, sorry. Yes, you're correct. That should
okay, just want to make sure that.
No, you're right, yep.
Okay.
I'll make sure we get that corrected on the permanent file. Yeah, good catch.
Thank you.
As we look at how the maturity model work fits into the broader set of work groups that are currently working among the MDIC forum, as you'll hear in a moment from subsequent presentations today, you can see our work group here is forming those levels of maturity, again, moving beyond just compliance to the regulation and how do we use those regulations and standards as that baseline and moving our thoughts and our processes and our people and our metrics beyond simple compliance into ways that we can measure and truly deliver on product quality in a much more proactive way. So we do integrate closely with the work of the other working groups that you'll hear about today. For example, as we define what a baseline compliance versus a highest level of maturity might look like for a company in an area like metrics or competency, we're working closely with those work groups to make sure that we're aligned in our thinking, and as we all collect and gather results, that we're constantly trying to understand what those mean and form those connections. How will we measure success ultimately? So I mentioned what some of the benefits are. The first tool that we're trying out here in the next couple of months over the summer, we'll do a first brush of that as it is. We'll have a chance to adjust that, go back out and do a couple more proof of concepts with a slightly revised tool if we need to, before we open that up to a broader pilot program later this year. What we're aiming for are some of the bullets that you see on this slide that we can open up, some of those communication pathways between our regulators and industry, and we're really having those discussions about what product quality really means, how we're measuring that, how we're confident we're delivering on that. To Dr. Rulin's slide. I love that, how do I be compliant now that I know that? Now what do I do? And it seems daunting. So how do we kind of pull all that together in a nice, crisp way and have those conversations? We want to make sure that this effort is valuable not only for industry, but also for FDA, and that we can see together how this would improve product quality within a business and also might serve as some benefits to FDA in some of their risk management efforts long term. So this is a long road ahead of us to first run through this tool, make sure we got it right, make some adjustments, make sure it works as well, rolling it out to a broader set of companies to really run through it, do a pilot, gather some data, ensure that what we're setting out to do here, we've proven that, and we look forward and we thank all the proof of concept companies who have signed up so far, and we also will be looking forward to providing some updates at further open forums on the results that we've seen from these efforts so far, in a blinded way, of course. One thing I neglected to mention, actually, is in these proof of concept phases and pilot phases, we have developed some rules of engagement with FDA, and we're in the final phases of approving those rules of engagement so that we're sure this is taken in the best possible collaborative way between the parties and really is limiting our purpose or expanding our purpose of doing this maturity model assessment, and it's not seen as a compliance audit or a products quality audit. So that is something we're working on as well. So a long road ahead. I'll turn it back to Dwight at this time, and I'll just ask you to jot down your thoughts, as he mentioned in the opening comment. If there's one thing based on what I've said today that you think this effort could accomplish for you, or you hope that it accomplishes, then I'll ask you to just jot that down, and I'd be really excited to see those results.
Great, thank you, Jody. Operator, could you go over the information again on how to remind callers how to ask questions?
Certainly. As a reminder, ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to ask an audio question, please key *1, then record your name, followed by the pound key. You may do so to begin.
Thank you. So if there are, a question or two for Jody right now, we can take those. We can also put them at the end, but just want to see if there's any questions, either Jackie at your end, or if there's any callers that have a specific question on the material for Jody.
And no one is queued for questions at this time.
Okay. Jackie, do you have any questions there for Jody?
Yes,
yep, hold on.
Pat Schaefer with Deloitte. I know that there was some discussion around companies jumping in and volunteering for the proof of concept, and I've forgotten what's the risk of the proof of concept? The scoring on the maturity model is going to be kept anonymous, or is it going to be just not held against anyone?
Great question. Absolutely anonymous. We're being sure to really blind this and make sure companies do feel comfortable going into this initial assessment. The risk really is the investment of time from industry's perspective. So, it will be a 1 to 2 day offsite where we'll be asking you to come and bring a couple of folks from your company as well. There will be some pre-work involved in both training on the maturity model and its involvement in linkage to CMMI, as well as some information that will just need to be understood and collected ahead of time. I would say very low risk to industry from an exposure standpoint, and low to none. And most risk would be in time investment, and perhaps going through this, understanding maybe a company is really at baseline and kind of deciding that's where we are now, and there may not be value in them going forward at this time. But I think the benefit on the other side is really understanding where they are in that scale. They'll know where they are. They won't know what the other companies are, but they'll know where they are versus other companies who have participated. So, that's certainly a benefit of participating. But great point on blinding the data. Yeah. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, thank you, Jody. And as Jody said, there's actually 2 co-leads for each working group. And next I'd like to introduce to you Marla Phillips, who's the Director of Xavier Health at Xavier University, who also works with Chris McNamara at the FDA on this initiative. So Marla?
Great, thank you, Dwight. And yes, I just want to acknowledge, I know Kristen's on the line, and Kristen is Senior Advisor to the Deputy Associate Commissioner of ORA. A fantastic partner. We've been working together for the past 2 years on this. Dwight, would you mind forwarding the slide? Okay, so just briefly today, I'd like to share with you the purpose and outcome of our work, the process that we've used prior to being adopted by MDIC. I'll at least briefly touch on that. And then once we were adopted last summer, how we got to where we are, the timelines we have, and our expected deliverables, as well as those that we've already accomplished. Okay, so next slide. So the purpose and outcome of this whole initiative back when we started in May of 2014 was always to support the case for quality. And in doing that, we wanted to provide a system of metrics looking at every phase of the total product life cycle, not just, once the product's out on the market and you've got failures and things that are typically the types of metrics that you would track. So we wanted to look in pre-production or R&D, the production area, and post-production. And so providing that system of metrics across the total product life cycle so that it can enable companies to assess and improve the robustness of their critical to quality practices. And by doing that, we want to be able to reduce the risk to product quality. So then the outcome is an identification of quality system metrics that will inform decisions and trigger action in a way, if you can think about it, just shifting that right first time mentality closer and closer and closer to the initial days of development. And so that's the goal of all of this, really. Our final report is still on target for June 2016, which is what we had established at the outset. And so the way that we've done this is we have led a diverse team of industry professionals and FDA officials through a very rigorous, methodical process so that we weren't just caught up in groupthink or someone had an idea and we didn't even stop to think, okay, was that a good idea? So it was a very rigorous process. And as a result, our metrics are linked to their correlation to patient safety, design robustness, process reliability, quality system robustness, and failure costs. Okay, so this shows you, a diagram that we've been using in our group on the total product life cycle. And what you can see here is that we have 35 plus team members involved. And actually, in total, we've had over 45 team members involved over the course of the 2 years. We've had great work continuity. Just if any person left, they handed it off to a person in their group, or we were able to bring in new people to the organization that brought in different perspectives and experience. Through the work, as I mentioned, we had a very rigorous process. We started off by first identifying the critical systems, and so the team came up with 11 critical systems. And then we said, okay, within those critical systems, at least we know if we come up with measures, it'll be linked to a critical system, so it's not out in left field somewhere. But in those critical systems, what can employees do, actively do, or in other words, activities that would decrease the risk to product quality? And so we refer to those as gold and silver level activities. They're beyond compliance. So base level, you're already complying. What can you do beyond that? Again, thinking of the case for quality, goal was to shift that ownership of quality to the companies, giving them a way to put their finger on the pulse of their risk to product quality at any given time. So we're talking beyond compliance. The team came up with 97 ideas for gold and silver activities that you could do within those 11 critical systems. Then we sent out those activities to people within their own companies and other subject matter experts that we know of. So there were 208 people who responded in a survey on how could you measure those 97 activities. We had well over 500 results. I mean, I think closer to 1,000 results that came in. There were some duplications, but it was all deduped. We were able to sort it by phase of production and critical systems, so we could cut and sort and dice the information in a number of different ways. We wound up putting 125 ideas into a cause and effect matrix, which then said, how good is this idea of how to measure those gold and silver activities? And we basically said, if we got a good result for this metric, would it reduce our risk to, as I said earlier, patient safety, design robustness, process reliability, quality system robustness, and failure costs. And then by scoring those, you could do a Pareto analysis and see which ones scored the highest, or in other words, were most strongly correlated to those critical criteria that I just mentioned. The team then, at the very end, took a look at the data and made a decision on 17 measures that they wanted to finalize. And those were spread across the total product life cycle. We actually had 4 in pre-production, 8 in production, 3 in post-production, and 2 that were enterprise-wide. So that's where our 17 measures lied. And so it was nice to see that we did actually finalize measures that spanned the total product life cycle. Okay, so on this slide it shows to the left of the red line is everything I just described. In June of last year, June of 2015, we were adopted by MDIC, and the goal was to, come up with something that we could do in a year's worth of time. And so we could not, convert 17 measures into metrics and pilot those metrics. So we were, it was suggested that we come up with 3 measures. And so in doing that, we chose 1 for pre-production, 1 for production, and 1 for post-production. So in the June through September timeframe, the team selected which 3 they wanted to go forward with and converted those into metrics. And then the subsequent work has been focused on a pilot study of those metrics being conducted by 8 companies, and then developing best practices documents to support the pilot that would say, this is how you use that information to shift to that right first time mentality closer and closer to the initial days of development. Okay, I actually have 2 slides of team members just to show you, I'm not going to read the names, but I just want to show you the diversity. So there's a pretty large diversity in company size, level of management, the expertise that they have, meaning like the functional area that they come from, the product type of these companies, the years of experience of the people, and we actually have 5 FDA officials on the team. So it's been just a fantastic group, as I mentioned earlier. This is the group that's currently engaged in this final stage, but over the course of the 2 years, we've had 45 people involved, and it's been fantastic. So, all right, so now to the good part. What are the metrics, right? So the pre-production metric really focused in on design robustness, and we wanted to look at the number of product changes, ideally that were due to product or process inaction. And so how often did you have to change the product because the product wasn't developed properly to begin with or robustly enough to begin with? However, what we found was that most companies do not capture this data. And so that we could capture enough information to look at and trend, we needed to do a retrospective review so we could go back 2 to 3 years. We started this pilot in November, so if we just went from November to March forward, we would have had very little data. So looking retrospectively, we had to look at how companies are currently capturing the data. Because of that, we had to look at this metric from the point that the product hits the market going forward. We wanted to look at this metric during the transfer stage to say when the product is being transferred from R&D to production, how often do changes have to be made because of product or process development inadequacies. But anyway, so as mentioned, this is now looking at once the product is on the market, how many changes were made. Additionally, it tends to be a mixture of data. So depending on, not specific to the root cause of product and process inadequacies, again, because of the way data is currently being pulled. The next metric is the right first time rate. Again, this, these should not be that earth-shattering. It's how we use the information that's really key. So this one is typical right first time. We're looking at the number of units manufactured without nonconformances divided by the number of units that were started. One thing to note on this is that the number of units started can skew the data if you want to compare. Like if you have a product that has many, many, many units that were manufactured versus the type of product that's manufactured 1 to 10 times a year. So it can be skewed if you're trying to compare product to product. So we are looking at all of these metrics to see how we want to refine those, starting with the meeting this afternoon, and then an on-campus meeting later this month for 2 days. The last one that you see there is post-production, and what we wanted to do is take an aggregated view of elements that you're probably collecting and tracking and trending on your own, complaints, for example, MDRs, recalls, things like that. If you have capital equipment, then you might be looking at service records and installation failures. but looking at them in aggregate to see if that can tell you a bigger picture, big data type of view of your product. There are some refinements that we've already identified that we're going to be discussing today and at the end of May to look at that metric. But overall, there have been a lot of lessons learned from these three that we're seeing. We're coming out of the pilot study right now. So, I mean, I can't even share with you what we're learning because we're learning it as I'm talking. But it's exciting to see that we did get some data that will inform our decisions that can importantly feed into these best practices documents that are on the next slide. So the pilot study was a vehicle to get us the lessons learned to importantly have these best practices documents in the hands of people and companies that will help them inform decisions and trigger actions, as we mentioned. So one example is, looking at the output, if you can triage the root causes, it can really help you dissect what's going on with your product and process. We might identify through the pilot and other information that these amazing people on our team have from their own companies, that if you look at this metric in combination with another metric, it can tell you a bigger picture. So we're looking at all kinds of ways to best use the information from the metrics. Again, we're not thinking that this one metric with the number that comes out of it is going to enlighten your world. It's more, how can you use that information to shift that right first time mentality closer to development. Right now, you can see we're down below. We are just coming out of the pilot studies, and as I mentioned twice already, we're meeting about it this month, and we're on target to have our final report in June. Okay, just want to mention real quick first of all, PwC has been fantastic in supporting us in this pilot study. Just unbelievable amounts of data and work that they've put into this. So they've been collecting data from 8 companies, but I want to draw your attention to the pilot study goal up top. The goal, again, if we're looking at the case for quality, is to give companies a mechanism to put their finger on the pulse of their own product quality and stop focusing on compliance. That's the case for quality mission. So the pilot study was set up so that we could compare multiple products that these 8 companies submitted against each other, not to compare companies against each other. So company 1 would look at their products that they entered to see if they can notice a difference based on looking at these metrics, to see if they can notice a difference in the risk to product quality. So I've already mentioned that it's been a 2-year retrospective review, in some cases 3 years. Let's see, let me look down. We're investigating some hypotheses to assess. Again, this is all real time. The hypotheses have been developed by PwC that we're going to be discussing with the team. And importantly, I just can't emphasize enough that with the work we're doing, only in-company comparisons can be made, since company-to-company comparisons involve variables that could lead to false conclusions, even risk tolerance, a whole host of other things. And then the last slide, so the deliverables, the first 3 are what we accomplished before being adopted by MDIC, and that's what I described to you. Our final 2 deliverables are to take the pilot study data and analyze it, and then fold that into the best practices documents for companies to be able to use.
Great, thank you, Marla. So we'll take questions by phone again, and as well as move over to Jackie and see if there's some questions in her conference room.
As a reminder, ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to ask an audio question, please key *1, then record your name, followed by the # key. You may do so to begin.
Yeah, Dwight, we have a question here.
So of the 8 companies participating in the proof of concept, are they of varying sizes, or are they all really large companies? So I see a lot of big company names on the list.
Right, they are of varying sizes, varying product types. Like we even have capital equipment and plantables. I mean, we have all different kinds of product types and company sizes. And I should say, I'll just point out, importantly, the company size really, it obviously was a concern in the beginning, like what are we going to come up with, and can small companies do this? it really isn't a factor. If you look at the metrics that we put together, most companies should be doing this already. And so what we're doing is putting together a guidance document of how can you use this information to make decisions.
Okay. Any other questions there, Jackie?
Yep, we have one more.
Right. Hi, Marla. It's Mark Swanson.
Hey, Mark.
Yeah, the other thing, that's curious to me in all of this, as we, both you and I teach the programs in quality and competencies, and helping people understand this, the direct application of it. And then also rolling this into the quality management system and data, the requirements in the quality management system for companies to do data analysis. And I'm trying to figure out how to ask this without kind of pointing to some bad practices, but, is this something, you just stated at the beginning that it was something that they weren't really capturing. Do we foresee that kind of across some of these metrics, that there's companies that aren't really capturing the exact data, and that's some of the practices we're going to have to change? And if that goes for manufacturers, would that also then go for hospitals, payers, providers, all of that kind of stuff?
Right, great question. So, yeah, I think the design controls one seems to be one that was the most challenging. Again, we wanted to look at design changes related specifically to product and process development inadequacies, and we wanted to capture them during the transfer stage. What was interesting is we just had our medical device conference last week at Xavier, and Kristen and I presented this work, and from the podium I asked how many are capturing the data the way we wanted to originally, and out of 370 people, about 3 or 4 people raised their hands. So to answer your question, I think one of the big learnings out of this is if you really want to understand what's going on and highlight to senior management, create some visibility to how many times has the product come through from R&D that's inadequate, then you can actually go back and fix the system that's allowing the failure to come through to begin with. And that failure would then be robustness of input into their product design and thought process, whether it's voice of customer, human factor engineering, clinical studies, whatever's needed to make it right first time as it goes through. So I think there's going to be, that learning alone of, if you can collect it in this way, it'll give you much more meaningful information. And then also linking this to the competencies working group where they're focusing on the senior management review, it really arms the senior management and that review process with some information they can look at and make some decisions. As far as your question about payers and providers, I don't know what they're currently collecting, but a similar assessment could be done to see if they're looking at things specifically enough and early enough, and then what are they doing with it.
Well, so then the follow-up would be, what you're doing with metrics, is this mostly just aimed at manufacturers, or is there a component that will be the payers, providers piece as well?
This is aimed only at the manufacturers. I think there are, with the analytics group, they're trying to determine if this could be meaningful in any way to the payers and providers. We don't have in our charter, and I personally don't have the expertise myself to even look into what should payers and providers be assessing. So that would have to be a different effort, or someone different than me, I think, at least. I have no experience in that.
What about for service providers like sterilization or lab or calibration?
Yes, they are included. So even Steris, for example, has been part of our team. So service providers are included. Mm-hmm.
This is Kristen. I would just add that, the value of MDIC is that you bring all these different stakeholders together and use that venue to have these very conversations. And that's what we're so looking forward to having, the conversations around the metrics that we develop to engage others, payers, providers, and others, and see what they would make of them, and if they would be acceptable standards that we could all begin to share.
Yeah, that's a great point, Kristen. Thank you. Operator, any calls, questions on the?
No, sir, there are no questions.
Okay. Well, Marla, thank you so much for your time. I know you just, like you said, had MedCon, and so thank you for coming to present. And I also wanted to just inform the general public who may be listening that we will have an open forum on June 28th about metrics informing both the industry and the FDA on product design and manufacturing quality metrics. So mark your calendars for June 28th. It'll be in Washington, D.C. at the Pew Charitable Trust. And again, Marla, thank you for your time. You'll be there to speak as well on some of the latest information that you've learned through your team, and we'll also have other additional speakers. So, so thank you so much again for.
Sure, thank you. Thank you.
Up next is Mike Schiller, who is the Director of Supply Chain for the Association for Healthcare Resources and Materials Management. And Mike also has a co-lead, Ann Farrader from the FDA. So, Mike, you've been tagged to talk about, I see you've changed your name now to Product Quality Outcomes Analytics. So please take it away.
Great. Thanks, Dwight, and thanks, everybody, for your time this morning. So, as Dwight mentioned, we're focused on product quality outcomes. And if you just jump to the next slide, Dwight, I just want to show our team here. As you can see, we've got a really rich team here, multidisciplinary team that's made up of a number of different communities. We've got our manufacturing representatives. We've got subject matter experts, data scientists, as Dwight had mentioned, Ann Farrader, who's my co-lead here, is with the FDA. A group that we don't have listed on here, but is a very vital, important aspect of our team, are the value analysis committees that have come up alongside of us and are participating in our project. And I'll get into really kind of the focus and our purpose here of this work group. But we've got 4 value analysis committees that have raised their hands and that are going to be working side by side with our team throughout the course of the project. We've got another value analysis committee that we've reached out to, and they're just discussing internally, and the decision is pending. So we could have up to 5 value analysis committees. And again, that provider voice is very important and vital to the scope of our project. The next slide, please. So as you can see here, talking about communities, we've got a number of different stakeholders listed here, and as a team, we've listed some of the foundational pillars within each one of these communities. And the focus here, is, as you can see across all the different communities, we're really focusing on the provider and the manufacturing side of this, the equation here with our work group. Really, the purpose of the group here is to identify quality criteria that the healthcare professionals utilize when making procurement decisions around products and medical devices. Right now, it's critically important to these teams, and this is why the value analysis committees are really very important to this project. Accuracy, completeness, access to unbiased data, these are all critical components in the decision-making process. And let me back up just a little bit here for those that may not be familiar with the Value Analysis Committee concept. The Value Analysis Committee is a multidisciplinary team within a hospital setting. It's comprised of supply chain professionals, clinicians, physicians, members of finance. You could have members of risk management. You can have biomedical engineering. So you can have different individuals engaged at different times depending on the scope of the product that you're looking at, and also depending on the department or departments that are evaluating the product, surgical versus acute care settings. So these groups of individuals will come together, and again, they're looking for quality criteria when they're making these decisions. And so the focus here of our group is, where do we get accurate, complete, and unbiased data to provide to the value analysis committees? But that's only half of the focus. The other focus really is to develop that formal feedback loop to the manufacturers, to the companies. We want to create transparency in this process, and we want to create this feedback loop on product quality so that the manufacturers and companies understand the quality criteria that the healthcare professionals utilized, and then the formal feedback loop into the performance and the quality of the products. And UDI is another component here that plays very nicely with this when we can get into some post-market surveillance. But for the focus of our work group here, it's really creating that comprehensive loop, quality criteria and a formal feedback loop back to the manufacturers. Because at the end of the day, without access to independent, reliable, quality information, the stakeholders, the healthcare professionals, are unable to make purchasing decisions based on these quality decisions or these quality criteria. And without that formal feedback loop, the market is really unable to reward manufacturers for quality improvements. So the focus, next slide please, the focus of our work group here is really around knee implants and defib devices here. And really, we want to identify criteria for comparison across these two product categories. The scope of this project, while confined to these two product categories, one of the goals here is to make this scalable, to be able to incorporate additional product categories to this so that we can go ahead and begin to expand it. But for the time being, the team felt the best products to go ahead and focus on were the defib categories and the knee implants. And I think part of that, too, is the volume that's there. And, again, I mentioned briefly the UDI, and I don't want to get into UDI here. It's really out of scope. But the UDI plays very nicely within these two product categories. So we want to identify limitations on data. We want to identify limitations on analytic models and how those limitations impact broader device types. And then we want to understand value analysis committees and their ability to interpret and use different dashboards, different data sets, what they're using currently for the decision process, as well as for ongoing access to information. So again, the value analysis committee feedback is a very important part of this project. Next slide, please. So the team, we came up with a definition of 5 different quality domains. And I would imagine that if we asked each of you on this call, your definition of quality, your definition of safety, of reliability, et cetera, everybody would have a little bit different take on it. So we felt it was very important as a team to create a foundation that we can all work off of and a common understanding. And so we've got our 7 quality domains here, and some of these seem pretty straightforward. I know one of the quality domains that we do receive some questions on is the quality domain of availability. But as a supply chain professional myself and working with clinical and physician partners, product availability is very important. I mean, you can have the best product around, but if we're unable to get that product into our healthcare institutions to bring into the patient care setting to bring about the desired patient outcome, then that's a quality factor and it's an impact to the overall patient quality. So availability is important from that perspective. And value analysis committees, it was interesting, a number of different value analysis committees that we had interviewed had identified availability as one of the quality domains. So these other quality domains, again, are pretty straightforward. I'm not going to go ahead and read each of the definitions that we perceive, but again, it was really foundational for us to go ahead and create that baseline understanding, that foundation that all of us will work together on collectively. Next slide, please. So our journey, you know, we're gathering multiple data sources. Right now we've got FDA medical device recall data. We're also looking at registries. We had hoped to receive some information from a value analysis committee partners. We're still working on that. Not sure that we're going to be able to access the level of information that we were hoping to. But the important thing is identifying those data sources out there. We're looking at industry sources and other sources. And then we want to extract information, again, going back to our 7 quality domains, across. We want to extract information across each of these domains. And then we want to create dashboards. And so the dashboards, right, we're going to have a couple of different iterations of dashboards. Again, right now we've got an FDA dashboard with quality data that our value analysis teams are looking at and reviewing and identifying the value of the data that is in that dashboard. We've also engaged a third-party firm that will be providing additional dashboard data for the second iteration of a dashboard, and that would include quality criteria and information from industry sources, various registries, and publicly available data. And so a third-party partner will be putting this data together in a dashboard for our value analysis committees to go ahead and evaluate. And through each of these dashboards, we're looking for feedback from the value analysis committees, what works, what doesn't work, what quality criteria is useful, and which of the quality criteria may not be as useful as they'd like it to be. What other sources should we be looking at and considering? And so that's really the voice of the customer feedback. So that will be comprised through some surveys, not only with our value analysis committees, but we're also looking to reach out to the manufacturing companies and surveying them, because again, the value analysis piece is one component. That feedback loop into the manufacturing community is really important. Our goal here at the end of this project will really be to identify a comprehensive dashboard of quality criteria that the healthcare professionals can utilize, can incorporate into their medical device and procurement decisions. That set of quality criteria would be shared with our manufacturing communities and our manufacturing company partners. Again, creating that formal feedback loop so that they can understand the quality criteria that the healthcare professionals and communities that are using their products are looking for. Next slide, please. So we've got our timeline here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Just want to bring everybody's attention to the fact that we are right now in the analyzing published dashboards portion of our project timeline. Again, we've got the FDA data that's currently under review. We will have some feedback from our value analysis partners later this month. We'll be, again, creating additional dashboards for our value analysis teams to go ahead and evaluate. And that will really take us through to the end of June. And then the summarize and recommendation portion of the project timeline on July, August, September would really be to come back together, review the surveys from both the manufacturing and analysis communities, and identifying what those quality criteria are. Next slide, please. So this last slide here is really, this is just a mock-up. As you can see there, our little disclaimer on the bottom there, it's illustrative purposes only. But this is to give an idea of some of the final products that we're looking to develop here and dashboards that we're looking to create, again, with our partners in this project. So what we're looking to accomplish here is really a summary of reports that is similar to a consumer reports. That was one of the goals and objectives that we set out to accomplish at the onset of the project, is to really develop something that looks and feels like a consumer's report that allows us to quickly compare manufacturers and products across different quality domains. A technique like sentiment analysis can help us to analyze text from healthcare user forms and extract information about patient satisfaction. A technique called survival analysis can help us to determine reliability. These, again, are some of our quality domains. We can also cluster text to identify common themes related to product safety and effectiveness. So that the value here is that we're able to visually display this information, visually display and help us to understand device quality that we're pulling together through those 7 quality domains. And with that, Dwight, I guess I'll open it up to any questions that our attendees may have.
Great. Thank you, Mike. So again, we'll take calls from the audience as well as those in Minneapolis, Jackie, for you if you have questions, if your folks have questions.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, go ahead.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to ask an audio question, please key *1 on your phone, then record your name followed by the pound key. You may do so to begin.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of thinking about this, I have a concern because one of the pieces of data that's not being captured as part of this, it appears, is the cost. And so, I mean, you just know we have the Affordable Care Act, right, to help. The thoughts are to drive cost. That, you know, most of the hospitals are concerned with cost. You know, we talk about total cost, and I think, you know, we'll talk about in the competencies group, one of the core areas is cost of poor quality that we're driving to. And I'm just wondering how that all, you know, and you talked about the value proposition, the value committees. Is cost a factor that needs to be put into this?
Well, cost is one of the criteria that did come up in our discussions with our value analysis communities and certainly among the team members. But when we really boiled it down to a quality criteria, quality looking at the patient satisfaction, quality looking at outcomes, we felt that including cost as a quality criteria really probably didn't make as much sense as including the 7 that we did include safety, reliability, usability, effectiveness, patient satisfaction, compatibility, and availability. But you're certainly right with you know, the Affordable Care Act. There's a focus on cost, but I would also argue that there's a huge focus on outcomes. And I know at ARM we've got a movement that we are advocating very strongly on, and that's cost, quality, and outcomes. So cost is one component, but really the outcomes focus is also a big component of the Affordable Care Act. So again, we just didn't think that it fit the mold of the 7 that we had on here. I don't know if Ann is on the call, and Ann can make any comments, but I mean, it's certainly something that we can take back to the team and revisit. But at this point in the project, again, it didn't seem to fit with the other quality criteria that we had identified.
So I think you covered it very well, Mike. I don't think I have any additional questions.
Yeah, I just think that most of us are kind of going the other way of translating quality issues into cost so that it becomes a common language, and to just stay in the quality criteria realm might hurt us in adoption is one of my concerns. So I just expressed that again.
This is Joe Sapienti. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment, and I think Mike and Mark, you guys raised some good points. And in the early discussion around the analytics and the Value Analysis Committee, it was about the Value Analysis Committees looking to change the conversation, and Mike, you mentioned the clinical outcomes. That's certainly a huge factor. Cost is a factor. But I believe we also heard from the Value Analysis Committee member that they wanted to hear from folks that were speaking about the quality of the products in terms that maybe a sales and marketing person or a no offense to anyone, but the logistics people didn't have the technical expertise to have that conversation. So when they're making the decision, they're factoring in costs, they're factoring in outcomes, but they're also factoring in the quality elements, and certainly quality and outcomes overlap each other, and then the economic value brings in the cost. But I think in the early stages, we did talk about cost, but to the points that were already made, we focused on the quality aspects because the Value Analysis Committees were looking to change the conversation, and also the source of the person who was having that conversation, which then led the competency team to talk about how, you know, who do you put up in front of a Value Analysis Committee? It's not a sales and marketing person. It's a quality person. It's an engineer. It's somebody with a technical background to present that technical data that the Value Analysis Committee was looking for.
Great. Thank you, Joe. All right. Operator, are there any calls online?
No, sir. No one has queued for questions at this time.
Okay. Well, Mike, thank you again so much for giving us.
Excuse me. We have one additional question.
Oh, great. Thanks, Jackie.
Yep.
Brody Pedersen again. So how are the data and analytic model limitations being communicated around the collection and presentation of the data?
I'm not sure I'm following your question.
Well, you stated early on in the presentation that your data and analytic models have limitations relating to different data sets based on where the source is and how available the data is from certain manufacturers or others. And that's an important assumption and important statements that should be clarified around the data so that can be part of the analysis.
So will there be like a, kind of like a disclaimer or such on the dashboards that says, you know, it might not represent the full data set or, yeah, or the confidence intervals or something like that?
This is Ann. Is my mic on?
Yes, Ann, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, the initial FDA dashboard has a big disclaimer because MDR and recall data is self-reported by the firm, and we recognize that reporting practices vary. So that's the first iteration of a dashboard. The second iteration will include a disclaimer as well. So it's important for people to understand where the information comes from and what the trade-offs are, what the risks of each data source are.
The other consideration I think is really important is there's a lot of differentiation between devices from various manufacturers that may not be important in the aggregate, but from an individual patient perspective is a very important consideration for certain patients since patients differ so greatly.
Absolutely.
How is that going to be accomplished?
And clinicians vary as well. So a device that works well in one clinician's hands may not be the best device for another clinician. So I think that that's an important disclaimer to use as well, that this is information a value analysis team could consider, but it's not the end result that's best for each patient and physician combination.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Ann. And thank you, Mike. So we will go to our next speaker. Pat Baird is the Director of Risk Management for Baxter International, and he's going to tell us about the competency.
All right, thank you. If you want to move on to the next slide. A little background on the competency development project itself. I actually just copied some information from our charter. A little bit of background regarding the purpose of the competency development project. We need to improve overall quality, and to do that, we think we need to improve the competency, awareness, and understanding, and not just on manufacturers, but across several key stakeholders. The problem that we noticed is that we had an inconsistent understanding of what quality really means. I think it was alluded to before that quality is being confused with compliance, and we want to try to fix that. And because of this lack of clarity on the differences between quality and compliance and a couple other related concepts, there's lots of inefficiencies and risks across medical devices. So our mission statement is that we want to take and promote those programs where we can take and learn from each other and move beyond cost containment and compliance into a bigger picture view of quality. Next slide, please. So our overall plan on how to get there for the competency team said, well, first of all, we need to know where are the competency gaps, what issues do we need to take and address. After we know what the issues are, then prioritize them, choose a few pilot topics that we want to focus on to improve, collect some background information on those topics and what kind of information do we want in the training materials. Develop a white paper, various job aids, training materials, and publish and promote it. Next slide, please. So in the first step, we needed to say, well, where are the gaps? And so we spent some time identifying about 2,000 competencies and over 40 different roles that impact device quality. We said what competencies are most important to which roles. We said, what's our current state? And let's take a look at the gap analysis between the two. The heat map shown here is a screenshot, obviously too small for you to read, but the intention is to see that there's sort of patterns in where the gaps in the competencies are. You see lots of red in certain areas and green in others. What I also found interesting about this little analysis is that you could see on some of the vertical columns, there are many places where there's lots of yellow or lots of red, and so that indicates a particular role that is a good opportunity to improve competencies. In other cases, looking horizontally across, you can see there are certain competencies that have gaps in many different roles. And so there were a couple different ways that we could take and approach it. But we finally decided that, you know, for the first time around on this, we should focus on manufacturers and providers and taking a look at quality execution and understanding the value of quality. That was where the majority of the red items were. You want to go on to the next slide? We also wanted to sort of get an external validation of, are we working on the right things? This is what the spreadsheet says, but gut check with folks that attended one of our open forums to see what are the top issues that they've identified. And here's a, well, I intended it to be a top 10, but I see that I cut off the copy and paste. So this is the top 9 issues. The items in blue are items that we saw were top issues in the survey that matched the top issues in our spreadsheet, and said, wow, there's a lot of overlap. There's lots of common themes through the top few issues. So on to the next slide. What we decided to do is go forward with management review and understanding the cost of poor quality. Those two topics seem to have a thread going through those blue items that you saw before. And what I really like about picking the management review and understanding the cost of poor quality is that one's very tactical. One, you can start implementing things in the very next month. And the other one is a little more strategic, that it's a longer-term project, and it'll take you a little longer to collect the data and get where you're going. But I kind of like having that short-term and long-term approach. So for this year, what we want to do for both management review and raising the awareness of the cost of poor quality is draft up guidances, come up with some fictional examples, develop some job aids, have a webinar or other sort of recorded pitch for this is why we think that this is important. For cost of poor quality, we're also chasing having a panel discussion at AdvaMed, not just talking about the case for quality, but specifically talking about the topics that we have here. Next slide, please. So collecting some information about those subjects. Now that we decided management review and cost of poor quality is where we want to look at. For cost of poor quality, one of the first things we need to do is take a look at what are some of the cost categories and drivers if you want to take an advance. And there's lots of published information out there on various taxonomies of costs. And so our task was to see which ones we thought applied best to our industry and then convert them to industry-friendly language. If you want to go ahead and tap the next and one more. We came up with sort of an inventory of there's all kinds of different things that we can take and measure. But let's start ranking them for how impactful are they. If we were to take and measure this, can we get a big change out of it? And how easy, how feasible are they to be able to take and collect some of this information? Something that's really impactful but is hard to collect, well, that's probably not a good idea for us to look at first. And something that's really easy to collect but doesn't tell you anything about your systems, that's probably not so handy either. So in the middle of ranking some of these, if you want to go on to the next slide. And we also started talking about a white paper and what should the content of the white paper be. This would be sort of partly a sell sheet for the concept and partly an educational piece. The targeting audience includes the C-suite itself to get the buy-in to say, hey, yeah, this is something we should look at. The other audience is actually the action taker, so the person who needs the very pragmatic step-by-step, collect this, organize it like this, here's some job aids to help you. We don't want it to be just yet another paper on, gee, you should really pay attention to quality. We wanted this to be something actionable. And so you can see, I won't read off the sections of the white paper to you, but you can see that we have a cell in the beginning. We move on to big picture vision statement and problem statements, but then we also get into the nitty-gritty process steps, lots of discussion on sharing of successful practices and the things that do work. I had to smile. Someone had made a comment in one of the earlier presentations about sharing best practices, and sometimes I think it might be more impactful if we share worst practices of this sounds like a good idea, but trust us, it doesn't really work because of X. And so in the white paper, we want to capture some of those real-world learning and make it so perhaps the reader doesn't have to go through that process themselves. And then wrapping up, trying to get back, of course, to patient safety. Don't want to be too consumed with costs that we lose sight of the fact that this impacts patient safety. And then finally, some parting thoughts. You want to go on to the next slide, please? Again, the white paper was going to take and show some examples, but to ensure that our examples are consistent and get them to be easier to read, we started developing a dashboard. And so it'll help the white paper, but also a blank dashboard will help jumpstart some people in customizing and developing their own internal dashboards customized just for them. We also realized that some people are going to skip the white paper and just jump straight to the Excel spreadsheet. So we're making sure that the dashboard itself contains some instruction on how to use the dashboard, what to fill out, some additional, some guidance documents. The white paper is better, but we know people are going to jump straight to the spreadsheet. In the next slide, I took some screenshots. This is definitely a work in progress, but I wanted just to show off some of the great work that's been developed so far. You can see just lots of colors, lots of different representations of graphs versus tables, certain things being highlighted, and you can also see just from this quick screenshot some on-screen instructions. A quick question for my phone is beeping low battery, of course, because it waited until I started talking to be low battery. Am I still on?
You are still on. We lost you for a second, and I think Joe is on in case we lose you.
Got it. Switching to backup phone now, I think. Am I here on the new phone?
Okay, great. Thank you, Pat.
Right, thank you. So then if you want to advance, please. I took some additional screenshots. Yep, one more time. So a simple thing of roles and responsibilities. Another job aid part of this suite of here's one process flow across different swim lanes and which of those roles perform which parts in the data gathering and collecting and dissemination of this information. If you want to advance again. Several other, just inventory lists of things that you can take and capture, lots of built-in graphs, et cetera. If you want to keep going, I think there's one or two more. Little speedometers and color-coded and graphs, et cetera. Obviously, a work in progress. Obviously, we haven't even populated it with fake data. But the point being, we're trying to develop the tools to help folks out. Joe had brought up a good point to me the other day of we need to make sure that we maintain focus on the process and not just, isn't this a nice spreadsheet, fill in the blank. We need people to understand the process behind it. But I really wanted to take and share this with folks. I'm going to move on to the next slide. With management review, it was mentioned before by the metrics team that we plan on using a lot of their information and feeding it back into consideration for management review. I'm particularly interested in how is it sometimes that the numbers that we collect can confound different aspects of the measures. And what I mean by that is, oh, gee, last quarter we had the lowest number of CAPAs opened, in the past 3 years. Does that mean that we're really so good that we don't need to open so many CAPAs anymore? Or did we just stop opening CAPAs? And so being able to understand that difference and communicate that difference, I think will be important. We're going to use a similar process that we did for what I shared before regarding the white paper and the spreadsheet. One of the extra twists that we have with management review is that folks that are familiar with 1345 know that it has recently been updated. There's some extra discussion in there regarding management review. There's also a guidebook slated to come out in the near future talking about 1345 and elaborates on management review. The nice thing is that our person who's volunteered, whether he volunteered or not, the person who's volunteered, Mark Swanson, to lead up the management review work for us, has also done a substantial amount of work on 1345 regarding the management review. So lots of overlap because it's the same person in both projects. You want to go on to the next slide? Just a quick little timeline, and the thing to pay attention to is in the lower left-hand corner over the course of the next month or so is developing that initial list of data and cultural metrics for management review and getting a first draft out of the cost of poor quality white paper. We'll move on to the next slide. Folks had mentioned their team members before. I've been on a lot of these committees in the past, and typically there are 2 or 3 people that talk on any given call, regardless of the committee I'm on, except for this committee. This committee is just so active. Everybody speaks up, and this committee's also grown a bit since we initially kicked off. I think we have 5 or 6 new members. That's nearly about a third of the size of the group since we'd started, and the new members are very, very active as well. And with that, just wanted to see if you had any questions.
Great, thank you. Once again, we'll take, if there's anyone willing to have a call in and talk to Pat, or we'll also go to, once the operator gives the instructions, we'll go to Jackie.
And as a reminder, ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to queue up for a question, please key *1, then record your name, followed by the # key. You may do so to begin.
Thank you. Jackie, any questions there?
Yeah, we do.
So as part of your white paper, you described the hook piece. How do you envision that unfolding? How are we going to get buy-in from the larger manufacturing community that this is important? Have you thought about what your hook statement is going to be?
Yes, we have, and of course I'm frantically trying to take and bring up my my draft of that. One nice thing I will say about this team is that we have several people who have been through this whole process already, as well as several people that are just starting on the journey. So we have the voice of experience and their practical viewpoint of, yeah, don't talk about that. Even though that's really important, don't talk about that. Instead, talk about this over here. This is how we get in. This is how we win, get their first wins to get the rest of it. And so when I mention sort of the pragmatic point of view, that's what I'm talking about. Some of the things that we talked about for the hook is just stories regarding good quality is good business. Perhaps even opening with a simple fictional yet grounded in reality story that demonstrates a problem the reader can identify with and keep them interested long enough that either they'll keep reading or they'll hand it to someone to finish reading and go execute. Any thoughts that you might have, I'd certainly be interested in how to make the hook sell even better.
One of the things that we thought was interesting, too, was when we're looking at the cost of poor quality equation, it's not just that costs are held within the manufacturers, but these costs of poor quality are spread across the value chain. And to what Michael Rulin, actually, he contributed to some of our cost of poor quality metrics. The impact to the provider community is substantial, and some of those costs do impact the manufacturers, such as not only recalls, but also the reimbursement for procedures that have to be redone because of failed devices, that sort of thing. So I think shining a light on the true costs across the value chain is part of that hook that you're talking about, that the number is probably a lot greater than all of us might think of at first glance. So the money might be the hook.
We're a very Midwest-focused team with Pat and I both here in Minneapolis and leading those two teams in Cost Before Quality and we met management review, and with the other Pat in Milwaukee. So we have some Midwest focus maybe, but.
So I think that's all from here.
Okay, thank you, Jackie. Operator, any calls?
No, sir.
Nope, okay. Well, Pat, again, thank you for your time, and I appreciate your presentation. So we'll go to the next item on the agenda, which we're actually trying to engage the folks on the line here with that question earlier on, if the working groups that you've just now heard from could accomplish one thing for me or for my stakeholder group, of whether you're an FDA or industry, et cetera, what would it be? And, having heard from all four of them, and I think, Kristen McNamara from the FDA said it great, this MDIC is about getting people together from different stakeholder groups and having these conversations. So do we have any questions either online or those in Minneapolis, the great Midwest state there, what could the working groups really accomplish together and what can they do for me? So Jackie, I'll turn that over to you first to see if there's any questions there, and then we'll open up to the line. Are you on mute, Jackie?
Well, yes, we were. So we're thinking. I think, we've been asking a lot of questions throughout the way, having a lot of discussion, actually, as the speakers are talking. There's been a lot of interest in kind of how these things are going to be rolled out and how we're going to be able to get the broader industry, the smaller groups. I appreciate Brody Pedersen's question around what size organizations have been involved in some of these things, because there are a lot of small companies, especially in the Twin Cities, a lot of startups who are just starting their journey, and things like Case for Quality and all of these metrics and all the stuff that we're asking people to do seems like a burden when you have 6 to 10 people in a headquarters somewhere trying to just get the business off the ground. Yeah. So,
and I mean, that kind of goes to, I think, the overall question of how can I get my top management, my business, small business owner, to understand the need to adopt these pieces of Case for Quality? And what's the value proposition? What's the return on investment to my small business?
Right.
So this is Marla. If I could just maybe comment, so when you talk about senior management, one of the things that we're looking at is taking the learnings from the pilot study to show, to see what the data shows. In other words, if you put more effort in improving the development, it would show that there would be an improvement in decrease in changes, increase in right first time, decrease in on-market type of failures. So I think you could paint the picture, and so it would just be more of using the information that hopefully they're gathering for the most part. Our understanding is for the design changes, it could be gathered in that way that we wanted going forward. It just wasn't in the past. So just be gathering the data in a different way going forward so they can use the information. But then at the end of the day, it really is up to the senior management and the culture of the company as to whether they even understand the value of quality.
Yeah, and what I would say, having worked in this area with so many smaller companies, it's very rare for there to be a quality person on staff. in a lot of these companies. They start with maybe a clinicals person or a regulatory person, and that's it. And quality is maybe done by a consultant from time to time. And so, you know, trying to, one of the things that we've talked about on the communications team is how do we get people outside of quality? How do we start looping in other people within the industry who aren't in a quality function, right?
I think you really need to make the focus of the investors and where some of that upfront money comes from, and teaching the rogue developers out there that there is a process that can be followed to cut time and cost to getting to market faster by following some of these principles and making that as one of your hooks. Right. Because without that, those small, early to market companies aren't going to see the value or understand the good that can come from following this type of process.
There's some pretty compelling case studies in the news today about fast to market, but then it all blowing up. I also think that's one of the reasons why we're targeting the C-suite in our cost of poor quality communications is that it's important for the business leadership to understand as much as the quality professional to understand.
But have we targeted the startup?
I like the idea of the investor community. That's a really intriguing idea to me.
Well, that's what I say, the small business owners.
Yeah.
These small companies, and having, as they look at starting, and often you see the serial startup piece.
Yeah.
People go from startup to startup.
Right.
Yeah.
And developing the competencies in them to understand why they need to have the case for quality and these things up front.
Another big deliverable is the change adoption plan. And
right,
so,
yes.
One of the things that we just wrote down is the investor community is one of those stakeholder communities that has to be factored into that change adoption plan.
Yep, that was
That's
a really good point.
So as I look at the participant list for each of the 4 groups, there are a lot of heavy hitter businesses and people who are likely coming from very mature quality organizations. Do we have adequate participation from the smaller startup community to help relay what is important to them, so that as we message these 4 pieces, that we can shape it to meet their needs?
Yeah. I mean, the answer to that is probably not enough, if any, but I think that that's a really good point that we can take back then and see how we can try and communicate and get some more involvement there.
Yeah, that's great. Good feedback. And I know we have some small companies, and one's actually on the steering committee. In terms of startups, I don't know how many startups we have. I wouldn't think they'd have enough time to, it's one of those double-edged swords. But that's good feedback, and we'll take that back to the steering committee for that.
Any other comments or questions?
Another group might...
This is Joe Sapienti. I had one comment with regard to the small company. I was on a phone call just yesterday with a few folks, and we discussed the likelihood of what would a small company look for. Is it a basic quality systems training, or is it an introduction into the case for quality? And I think based on the conversation I've heard today, it sounds like we would want to give them the case for quality to a broader group, so that we can then build on that, get the buy-in, get the support, and then the quality folks that would be assigned that responsibility for building quality systems would have the buy-in and support at the top level. So any comments with regard to that? That was one of the things that we were thinking about yesterday, and it sounds like that's sort of what this collective group is indicating today as well. Any comments about that?
I have one comment. So my name is Chad Hedlund. I'm with Oriel's Data Matrix, a consulting firm. And another group that might be worthwhile looking at are the consulting firms out there. You look at the smaller startups who are looking for some help in developing a quality management system. They often engage different consulting groups to come in and do that work for them. If we could tap into that
that group of individuals who do that consulting and help them understand the principles behind case for quality, perhaps there's a faster inroad into developing into the infrastructure of those startup companies. Just an idea.
That's a great point because, like I said earlier, that's startups and early companies, they don't have someone on their quality staff. They're just hiring consultants to come in. You just come in and build us a little quality system, and then we'll be good. Yep. We don't need any of your kind here. We have our regulatory person. Just put a few procedures in place, and we're all good. So that's a really good point, I think.
Thank you. Pastor.
I think another piece to that might be things to look for, ways to implement tools to help early companies develop robust requirement sets. Part of getting it right the first time is documenting what you're really looking for up front. Have a plan and work to it. And then streamline quality system controls implementations for easy implementation. Most people look at a standard like 1345 and go, what is that?
Or, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And what pieces do I really need right now?
Yeah. Do I really have to do all of this? So.
Right. Good.
Okay, great. Thank you. Operator, are there any calls on the line?
No, sir. No one has queued up for questions at this time. Okay,
thank you. Well, we're a little ahead of schedule, but Bill McFarland from the FDA is standing by, and we can go ahead and introduce him. Bill is the Director of Division of Manufacturing and Quality, FDA, and he is going to speak to us about what the FDA is doing on the case for quality. Bill?
Thank you for that introduction, Dwight. Let me get right to the agenda of what I plan to cover over the next half hour or so, or if you could go to the second slide that has outline. So for 10 minutes, I was going to just give you a quick update on what's going on at FDA on various projects. Then I was going to spend 10 minutes on some questions that I gave various FDA case for quality participants. And I did that so that I could share their perspectives with you today. Then also, I want to make sure I leave 10 minutes or so to hear any of your questions and to provide you answers. So let's get right into our FDA projects and what's going on. Thank you, Dwight, and even into the next slide, which gets into what we're trying to accomplish here on our project. So hopefully you saw in January our CDRH strategic priorities came out, and these are priorities focused on the next 2 years. And we've been busy behind the scenes putting together our plans, trying to forecast what we plan to do over the next 2 years. And if you turn to page, if you had that in front of you, you would see on page 11 what we're calling the kind of an external quality goal. It's strengthening product and manufacturing quality within the medical device ecosystem. And we have some deliverables this year, that is developing metrics and industry practices and approaches that can help FDA evaluate product and manufacturing quality above and beyond compliance. As well, this year is piloting voluntary use of metrics and evaluation tools. I'll get to that in a moment. But then we're also looking forward to next year when it comes to quality in the ecosystem, and that is putting together proposals next year on voluntary programs utilizing independent evaluation of product and manufacturing quality. So really what I'm talking about in the next slide relates to this new set of strategic priorities that came out in January. So let me jump it right in with maturity model. So our FDA representative on the MDIC maturity model project has been Francisco Vicente. And when I talked to him, he indicated that key for 2016 will be our participation in this MDIC proof of concept effort. What we're going to be doing throughout 2016 is thinking about or identifying what information coming from the maturity model could be used by FDA to evaluate quality. As we think about that, analyze that, the pilots will be stood up and operating on maturity model. And then moving forward to 2017, we're planning to consider what kind of a third-party approach could be utilized with respect to this maturity model concept. So that's what's going on here at FDA regarding maturity model. If I could move forward to analytics, our representative on this effort is Ann Ferreter, and we're actively participating in this MDIC effort and particularly focused on the pilot with 3 value analysis teams and looking at what information comes out of those pilots so that we can better understand what this analytics approach will bring, what information will come out of it, how stakeholders can use that information. That'll be particularly helpful as FDA contributes to this analytics effort going forward. Quality metrics, you heard from Marla earlier, and with the MDIC metrics pilot coming to a close at this stage, and you heard from Dwight, he indicated there's a plan to have an open forum on June 28th regarding quality metrics. FDA is going to be actively participating in that metrics meeting. In 2016, we're looking to utilize this particular approach in a pilot that would start by the end of the year. We'll be in a listening mode and engaging mode in that June 28th forum because we're going to see what kind of metrics can be used not only to evaluate quality systems, but also product quality as well, at least at the manufacturing end of the quality spectrum. We anticipate the pilot to start with a Federal Register notice this fall. That's what we have in mind. And we would, what we're thinking about is that the information that would be voluntarily submitted to FDA in response to that FR notice would be used by FDA next spring in some FDA program that we haven't yet identified. Then moving forward in 2017, we plan to focus more on how this approach could utilize third parties in a manner that is effective, that is useful, that has utility for both device manufacturers and FDA. So that's what I can update you on with quality metrics and what FDA has in mind. So I look forward to talking with you all at that June 28th meeting and hearing your thoughts on the matter. So on to Library of Quality Practices. So if you've been watching the FDA Case for Quality page, perhaps you noticed that we've now updated it with links to AdvaMed and ASQ, American Society for Quality content. So you know AdvaMed and their library of practices. It has information submitted by member firms. It has a broad variety of information to offer on different quality system topics. And I think it gives the reader good ideas and tools to consider with respect to implementation and quality. And then there's the ASQ page that we provided a reference to. It provides tools from the experts in quality. It also provides some resources that could be used to approach different quality topics. So then you're probably asking, so what about FDA's own content? And we've been working on that behind the scenes. And what we have in mind are, we're thinking case studies would be the right tool for sharing information and to help educate on a couple of quality principles. Those first target areas for those case studies that we have in mind are for cost of quality as well as quality problem solving. And what we're asking ourselves is how can FDA do this so that we represent the steps that a firm went through in dealing with some quality issues, rather than just sharing FDA's point of view. So beyond those case studies, what we're focusing on is how can FDA use this content to build, to identify, or even to aggregate various quality practices. So that's Library of Quality Practices and the update. If you haven't been to those links for that we've provided as references to the AdvaMed's webpage and their content, as well as ASQ's webpage and their content, I encourage you to try it out. I think they've got some great material. Then let's talk about PMA, CTQ for a moment. So what we're talking about on these PMAs, these pre-market approval applications, is that a post-market inspection of CAPA and quality control measures identified by the PMA applicant prior to PMA approval, this would be done in place of a pre-market inspection in this pilot. You know, it's in thinking about it, we've decided it's probably not appropriate for combination products, and it would be for firms that have no first-round quality system deficiencies in their manufacturing section. You know, and fortunately, firms with no inspection history or their last inspection was more than 5 years ago, those inspections just aren't recent enough to be criteria for participating in this pilot, or at least not having a pre-market inspection. This pilot would go in place with a federal registered notice that we plan to go out with this fall. So look for that FR notice, and that's what I have for you today on PMA CTQ. And that brings me to critical to quality guidance documents. That's right, I used the G word. If you haven't heard, what used to be what we were previously calling critical to quality information documents, they do need to be in the form of guidance if FDA is going to make this information public. Our team was given an option to offer the material in the form of a report, but a report would be just a one-time report of the information, not necessarily something that would be used by FDA. And so we received the decision that these need to go out in the form of guidance documents. And so we've been in the process of converting the material over to a guidance format. But also I'd want to indicate, you know, if you're familiar with guidance documents, you know most of them are pre-market review guidance documents. And these are different. So where the outline of your typical guidance document focuses maybe on what you spent at 510K, we've had to really do some internal education and make some decisions on what's the right kind of guidance content for a critical to quality guidance document. The same principle has not changed. If you've heard us talk about critical to quality documents before, we're looking to promote more awareness of device quality in our existing programs. But these documents wouldn't be used in lieu of existing policy or, say, an existing guidance document. So let me just give you a quick example so that you can walk away with a tangible understanding of how these guidance documents would work. You might picture an FDA investigator might use a critical to quality guidance document to prioritize what documents they might review in an inspection, but they're still following the quality system inspectional technique. Or a pre-market reviewer, whether it's a member of my division reviewing PMA manufacturing sections or our OD counterparts and all the different pre-market reviews they do, they might use a critical to quality guidance document to determine which features are most relevant for a particular device and therefore for the focus of the review. But you know, it's not like a 510K review would be different, or if there were a 510K pre-market guidance for a specific device, you know, that would still be followed as part of the 510K review. So these documents that we're generating, these guidance documents, are intended really to promote more awareness of device quality, not change existing policy or change existing defined approaches, whether it's pre-market review or post-market activities. In the upcoming months, you can look for 2 particular CTQ guidance documents to come out for public comment. One will be the critical to quality information for polymeric surgical mesh guidance document, and another will be critical to quality information for coded vascular and neurological interventional devices. Look for those two to come out first. We went with 2 out of the total set of 8 that we have been working on, so that can focus our internal resources and get those out to you for public comment, as well as to focus your comments on those 2 subject areas. But if you're welcome to comment on the CTQ guidance document approach when you see those first 2 come out. Your comments just don't have to be limited to those 2 specific areas. Once those first two guidance documents come out, we have plans for 6 more to go through the process, but what we're thinking is we will have worked out the process much more when we get to those following 6. So with that, Dwight, if we could go to the interviews with FDA participants. I did this just to help connect the case or quality audience with just the variety of FDA participants we have. And we have a lot of different perspectives that I just wish we could kind of bundle up and share with you in one way or another, and this is how I'm going to try to do that today. Next slide, the first person I interviewed, of course, Robin Newman, who is our new CDRH Office of Compliance Director. I asked Robin the question, how have your expectations for case or quality changed since coming to FDA? And it's probably obvious why I asked Robin this question, is because she just came to Office of Compliance in February after working in the device industry. And Robin shared her answer with me. Her awareness of case or quality really was not that extensive before coming to FDA. It just wasn't really clear how you get involved in this case for quality thing. But in coming on board to FDA, her eyes have really opened up, and she's seeing the extent of collaboration, whether it's at the MDIC events, the different pilot teams, also as well behind the scenes. So there's, she first commented on the extent of collaboration that she's seeing. And now it's even, she's becoming even more understanding of the challenge we have set up for ourselves on promoting device quality. When she's seeing the challenge that we're taking on with respect to personnel and competencies, or how quality is measured, whether it's internal to a firm or in the hands of the user, as well as new quality models, Robin was talking about how complex it is, the challenge that we're taking on, and the different facets of this quality effort. Bottom line, she indicated the more people that are involved for case or quality, the more perspective we will gain. And that's really important, she indicated, because that's going to just improve the results that we deliver. So that was my discussion with Robin Newman. I also talked to Steve Solomon. The question I asked Dr. Solomon was, has the progress and quality been what you anticipated? And I asked this question of Dr. Solomon because he's been involved in the effort for so long. So what has he anticipated? Well, he indicated he did anticipate these pilots, which are intended to promote more of a culture of quality. But in talking with him, he's looking forward as well. This effort to promote more device quality can't just stop with these pilots. He was talking about how important it will be for this to be an interactive and collaborative approach in defining the path forward. And it just, he reminded me, it can't just be something where FDA is driving this. It has to be something that makes good business sense with all of the stakeholders. And what that means, because there's so many different stakeholders, is something that no single stakeholder can drive on their own. So it has to be a very collaborative and interactive effort. He indicated that we're on the right track, and we're going to need more stakeholders to make even more progress. I took advantage of the opportunity and asked Dr. Solomon, so has there been anything that he hasn't anticipated? He said it is surprising the extent of effort needed to build trust and build relationships, even though we've been at this for some time. But Dr. Salman, he recognized this is because we're going through a cultural change. And FDA, end of the day, you know, we are still a regulator, but we're trying to build a different mode for firms that have demonstrated that quality approach. End of the day, we're still the regulator, though, and we'll need you know, that traditional mode for some firms, even though we're trying to build this quality approach as well. But in doing that, that creates a challenge for building trust. So I thought that was helpful that Dr. Solomon shared that. If I could move forward to Jan Welch. So I asked Jan, how is the case for quality different from previous quality efforts? And I asked Jan that because she's been involved for so long on, you know, many FDA device quality efforts, whether it was originally rolling out the quality system regulation 20 years ago, or efforts since, like, you know, Global Harmonization Task Force. And Jan began her answer with focusing on what we're doing today, and she recognized we're focused on a more proactive approach rather than a reactive approach. And that it's not just that we're talking about this proactive approach, that we're trying to build it into our various FDA improvement efforts. But then she reflected back, you know, when you think about the quality system regulation when it came out 20 years ago, and at first I was like, no, it hasn't been 20 years ago. It's only been 12, no, it's been 20 years ago. So that was I don't know where the time went. But she indicated that at that time, we just focused on what needs to be done to meet these new regulatory requirements. It was a very didactic approach. It was an educational approach. If this presentation I'm doing today was 20 years ago, you might hear me talking about what the regulation means with respect to, say, translating user needs into design inputs, and what do the regulations say regarding design inputs. It would be really focused on what the regulation says. So, you know, Jan then moved forward to what our approach today means. Not only are we trying to identify ways to be more proactive and building that into our improvement efforts, but if you look how we approach decisions today, we approach issues based on risk. We prioritize on risk. We figure out what the impact based on risk, what it is, and if it's not one of those situations having significant impact, we still try to identify what mode of monitoring is most appropriate so that we can follow the issue in case it's going to escalate again. Further thinking ahead in this conversation with Jan, she talks about how we will need to move further towards an approach correlated more with enhanced quality, and how different that will be compared to 20 years ago. And as we talked about what it was like 20 years ago, she said, you know, it's probably where the Food Safety Modernization Act folks are today and what they're doing with their stakeholders to talk about that new regulation as well, or that new section of the Act. So I thought that was a very helpful conversation with Jan, providing all that historical perspective. But I also talked to Kristen McNamara, and I asked her, how does FDA's quality effort compare to other FDA-regulated, other FDA efforts for regulated products? And I went to Kristen because she's always had her eye on different commodities, different FDA approaches with respect to quality and what the different centers are doing. And talking with her, she took me right back to one of those driving forces kicking off the case for quality originally, and that was globalization of the supply chain, that with an increasing number of foreign manufactured products, FDA can't afford to be reactive. You know, if we're just waiting for those products to be shipped and introduced to the U.S. before we're realizing what the state of quality is on those products, it's too late. It's too reactive. We can't afford to do that. And that put a lot of emphasis on FDA needing to identify a more proactive approach. She also indicated that in the device arena in particular, contribution from a range of groups is key. We need multiple perspectives to address this device quality challenge. And to get to those perspectives, we need different groups to participate. FDA has to, in the device space, FDA really has to be collaborative. It's not something where we can just dictate the solution. We really have to benefit from these different perspectives. Let me take you next to the question that I asked Sean. I asked Sean, so how unique is his cross-agency approach compared to other agency efforts? And I asked Sean this question because he's worked in so many different CDRH offices. He's also worked in the ORA labs as well. And Sean's answer focused on the uniqueness of case for quality. And he talked about, a typical agency effort would be focused on how different regulatory requirements are met. Our typical review process would focus on that first. And then once we've kind of gone through whether it's a checklist approach or more of a review approach, then we tend to turn our eyes towards how significant is this issue or what's its impact on the user. And he commented, one thing that's unique about case for quality is we're trying to build that focus into our perspective up front rather than wait for that work to hit our desk and for us to be very reactive in realizing what the impact is in the end. Talked about how we're trying to build that into the process up front. And, our typical approach here at FDA, is our approach is designed to focus our efforts on the non-compliant firm. And with case for quality, it's going to help us identify those high-performing firms as firms with the high-quality products so that we can adjust our resources where they are best used. So in the end, Sean commented about how case for quality helps us achieve our mission even better. And that's what makes case for quality so unique, is the way we're trying to achieve that. So I've got just 2 more interviews I did. One is with Ann Ferreter. Ann is on the analytics team. And the question I asked her is, what do you anticipate as the next challenge for case for quality? I asked Ann this question because she's really good at looking forward, whether it's to the next possibility or the next issue that we're going to be challenged with. Ann sees the next challenge as being the one where we need to correlate what, the metrics effort with the maturity model effort or vice versa. And both these efforts need to be correlated with quality in the hands of the user or the practitioner or the patient. We have some early success in this regard, but to get long-term and true buy-in, this needs to be an integrated approach. These different efforts really need to tie into each other. And that's Ann's bigger picture perspective. I did prod her a little bit to look at what the challenges are today, and she acknowledged that the teams in these pilot efforts, they have some large commitments. We all have day jobs that are just as challenging, and this can be a challenge with respect to providing results on time, yet also providing meaningful results. And that's really going to be the challenge for moving quality forward in this regulated space, is not just being on time, but also having meaningful results. And that brings me to my last interview question. It was with Francisco Vicente. I asked Cisco, how unique to the device industry is the challenge of promoting device quality? And if you know Cisco, you understand why I asked him this question. It's because he really is able to see trends and approaches in different industries and relate it to what we do day to day here at FDA. That's why I asked him this question. And leave it to Cisco. First thing he said is the challenge of promoting quality isn't unique to the device industry, which left me unsure how to handle the rest of the interview. But then he went on, there is something unique about this device space, and that's that there's other elements we need to address before we're going to get too far on promoting device quality. And what he was getting to was basically that fear or flight thing. So if you're a device manufacturer, that fear that, you know, what is FDA going to do with these different pilots, with these different tools? Are we going to make them into yet another compliance tool? Or, you know, put your FDA hat on for a moment. You know, FDA's concern about what is going to be the next safety issue that we are going to need to deal with. And you have to understand that really drives our compliance mindset, because we want to be prepared and ready for that next safety issue. So Cisco's saying that these issues need to be addressed first. And the barriers to quality white paper, it hints at this. I don't know if it calls it out directly, but what Cisco is seeing is that this is something we need to deal with before we can truly get too far down the path of promoting device quality. So those were the interview questions. I asked different FDA participants. I wasn't able to get to every FDA steering committee member, but I just tried to do a cross-cutting sample of who I thought could provide you some interesting perspectives on quality, case for quality, FDA's approach. So I hope that provides you some insight for today. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have, whether it's about the interviews I did or whether it's about my quick reports on the various FDA projects.
Thank you, Bill. That was a great presentation. I'm surprised you could take pictures within the FDA.
Yeah, there is an SOP on that.
I'm sure there is, like in other industry firms. But I'll have the operator go over the instructions one more time to open the line. I'm sure there's lots of questions for you. Go ahead, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to ask an audio question, please key *1 on your phone, then record your name followed by the # key. You may do so to begin.
Thank you. So, Jackie, I'll turn it over to you to see if you have any questions from this presentation.
Great. You know, we have one question from the room, and that was back relating to one of the FDA initiatives. Maybe you could do a little bit of an explanation. I don't think everyone's completely aware of what the CTQ documents are, what those guidance documents would be. What is the CTQ? How are you putting those together? What will it mean?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. And it is a bit of a challenge to just capture what is CTQ all in a 2-minute blurb. You know, maybe it's something where we need to spend upwards of 30 minutes or 60 minutes at an upcoming event just to walk you through the concept. But what it involves is FDA, first we start out with internal information on what we really think are the critical features and characteristics of a particular device. And we go through an internal process of talking to other CDRH and we're available ORA experts on the topic just to verify that we have the right list of features and characteristics we want to focus the document on. We then typically proceed with an outside group at starting to build information on how you control those features, how you control those characteristics, whether it's in design or manufacturing. And to date, for all, I believe it's all 8 of the guidance documents we have in process, AdvaMed has been excellent at helping us form teams that provide us some perspective and some input on what are the current approaches to how these different features and characteristics are controlled. And then we just make sure so that the document doesn't come across as some new and novel approach to quality. We do put in references to the quality system inspection technique as well as the quality system regulation, just so that it doesn't come across as something new or something different than what many firms are already doing. The idea is if we're going to improve quality, we need to start out by defining what's most important, what are those characteristics and features that really need to be attended to or focused on, whether it's in the manufacturer's hand or here at FDA with our various approaches, whether it's pre-market or post-market. Inside of FDA, it's not supposed to, we're really just trying to put a little more emphasis on quality in our existing programs. We're not trying to create a new program or a different approach. We're not trying to change how inspections are done or how pre-market reviews are done. We're just trying to make sure that quality is even more emphasized. So I think that's the best I can do in like a 3 or 4 minute response. I'm happy to, we've been out and doing presentations on what critical to quality is, and certainly we're interested in continuing and doing that so that people really understand what critical to quality guidance documents are and what critical to quality guidance documents aren't as well.
No, that was a perfect summary of what those documents are. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Bill. Are there any call-ins, operator?
No, sir. No one has queued up for questions at this time.
Okay. Well, the chance to ask the FDA anything, Bill, I guess it's going to go by. So thank you so much for your presentation. I really like the way you did the questions, and the answers certainly were spot on for those folks that I know. So thank you.
Thank you.
This is Bill's contact information, which will be available once this is posted. So I just wanted to end the forum today with the key deliverables for this year. As you've seen in the 4 working groups, there are pilots and proof of concepts that will probably be around the June, July, August timeframe. We're hoping to get some information from the 4 working groups at that time. That will feed into the change adoption plan, which is a plan that we're creating with the FDA to propose what actions need to facilitate really improving device quality. And as Jackie said in the beginning, it's really about enhancing the patient safety and access to high quality medical devices. So that's sort of the focus of this change adoption plan. And then how do we effectively implement the quality maturity model based on what Jody said, that really this whole process really hangs on the maturity model, and some of these working groups kind of feed off from that. So that's sort of the plan for September. There's different components of the plan, which I'll let you read at your leisure later, but as you've heard today, there's also some stakeholder groups that we want to make sure are represented in the plan to assure that this is a comprehensive plan that goes to the FDA for them to review. So in closing then, there will be a survey that comes out later today or early tomorrow about this. I understand there might have been some connection issues, so we apologize for that in advance. And then we will have a fall 2016 open forum that's being planned at this point in the September-October timeframe. So watch for more news at mdic.org/CFQ as we plan for that open forum for the fall. So I want to thank the speakers. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day for this forum, as well as the attendees. And I'd like to close the call now, operator.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes today's conference. Thank you for your